All right, it's 6:30. We will call the Finance Committee meeting. Let's take a look at the minutes.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion is second to approve. Discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. Discussion of possible action on claims in the amount of $801,051.95. Anybody?
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion is second to approve. Discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Do we pass that with one vote? That's good. Motion's approved. Discussion possible action on approving tax collection agreement with St. Croix County.
Good evening. This is the same terms as last year, no increases in cost or terms. So
Move for
there's
approval.
Second.
Motion is second to approve. Discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. Discussion and possible action on approving Laserfish software and service agreement with CDI.
Okay, so this is one of those ones that we had been talking about potentially doing prior to COVID, and then COVID just kind of pushed it all the way to the front. We right now do have a kind of electronic document management system, sort of, with the city. It's being used mostly kind of in building inspections and things like that, but it's not a system that we can really expand out for citywide. So basically, if you took a look at the Laserfish website, the short answer really is that it's electronic document management. So when you come into City Hall and you see all those files on the second floor, when you go upstairs and you see like all the building inspector files, all that stuff, the first step we would do is scan all those in and store them electronically in the system. So that way it gives us the ability to not only not have so many paper files laying around, but also be able to find them in one spot. I have to say that one of the things that we do come up with sometimes is that we can't find files. We assume they should be existing somewhere, but they're not always where we think they should be, and they're not always easy to come by. And then with this system, we'll be able to organize it all electronically, and we can give appropriate access to city personnel, where basically by keyword you can find any document you want in the system. The next step of this is that it also allows us to basically create our own electronic forms. So for anything that you can apply for a license or permit for now, you can do it. We can create a form, do it online. Laserfish creates a workflow, which is actually, once you know how to do it, very simple, basically drag and drop workflow. So say if we have on our website a liquor license application, once it's submitted, it would roll to Becky, and Becky would take a look at it. And if she thinks it meets all the general criteria, it then would say roll to Allison or Kathy, and they would verify that they have no outstanding bills, things like that they owe the city. Once they sign off on it, it would roll possibly over to Kathy, and the city attorney would review it to make sure it looks good. And then with the final sign off, it just goes back to Becky for approval, that sort of thing. So we're not scanning, emailing, walking things around, that sort of stuff. So that's another part of it as well. But basically, the biggest part for us right now is the electronic document management and being able to store files electronically, access them easily, be able to pull them up quickly. And then also, a big part too is to be able to retain them the proper amount of time. So right now, let's say a document has a 7-year retention period. Every year, Becky and Karen have to walk around City Hall, check out the boxes. The boxes should be labeled the retention period, but then they actually have to open the files, verify the retention's right, all that sort of stuff. And if it's all good, they can dispose of the files. With a system like this, we set an electronic date for destruction. And then when that date rolls around for each individual document, it just automatically gets sent to Becky. Becky reviews it. If we no longer need that document, we've met the retention period, she just deletes it and it's gone. And we no longer need it. So it's a very slick system. I've worked with it before. It's very popular among cities. It's honestly, at this point, about the only one that most cities use. So with that, as I kind of noted, it is about $28,000 for the first year, and that's to purchase the software, the training, things like that. Second year is about $14,000, and then moving forward, we're estimating maybe $20,000 a year every year. We're not quite sure on that number yet because it really does just depend on how much we use it and what we do with it. I would say the range would be 14 to 20. 20 would be the high end, so I wanted to put the high end in there.
What does it pay for, Aaron? And are you just having this absorbed into your budget?
Yeah, so it's basically it's paying for the software, the annual kind of licensing for the software. Then it also includes the like technical hours too. So if we have an issue or we want to create like a new workflow or something, they can help us with it. And if we don't use them, they just roll whatever hours we are would roll over to the next year, and that means we just buy less hours the next year. So that's why it's kind of an estimate. I kind of aimed high early, just thinking that maybe like in building inspections, he's going to need a lot of help to set up the building inspection workflow and electronic process for submittal and things. So that's why it's estimated, I think, on the higher end. But mostly it's probably roughly, I would say about maybe $10,000 a year is just kind of the software licensing and maintenance and all that sort of stuff. So that's kind of what you're really paying for. And then the rest is like training hours that you prepay for. But again, you can roll them over and then just don't buy as many next year. And so, like I said, the upfront costs, we would say we're going to use that CARES funding we received. So the city received 290,000. Was that right, Allison? Roughly? Was it 189?
228,000.
228,000.
Yeah,
Right.
228.
So we received the $228,000 in the CARES funding for the COVID expenses that we had. And this is one of the items that we flagged for use of that funding, was that upfront cost. And then in next year's budget, we have the 14,000 just factored into the IT budget. And then moving forward, we'll just factor it into the IT budget every year with our other annual maintenance and renewals of software agreements.
It just looks like it's the most expensive maintenance agreement we have.
Yep, it'll be up there. And the other part of that too, I should say too, is also the storage. We won't be storing, on site. We'll have off site plus backup and things like that. So you are paying for that part of it too, which is a kind of a big thing with the amount of documents that you have. So that is part of it. So yes, I would say this is one of our, and Brian would probably know for sure, but this is probably would be one of our more expensive ones.
So it would also pull up public record right away for requests?
Yes. That's another really nice one. And that would be one of the first things when we do a workflow would be public records requests, because we've been getting more and more lately. And it is difficult. I mean, you got to find that, you go to that department's got to look their files, try to find it, we get it back. And, our responses can be delayed just with the searching for the documents. And this will make it much more readily available for review, which also takes a lot less time for us, which means we bill less time because it'll take us less time to organize and get it pulled together.
I'll move we approve it.
Second.
Motion and second to approve. Discussion.
Just a quick question, Aaron, on it. Is it searchable then by keyword and all that kind of stuff?
Yep. So it's completely OCR. So you can search by any keyword and you'll get every document that has that word in it. Now, more specific you are, the easier it can be, especially with the number of documents we have. But yeah, if you want to do a general one, you can do a real general one and pull up every document that has that word in it.
Great. Thank you.
There's also tags you can set up that make it great for searching for PIDs or whatever. It'll search all across the board.
Great. One last question, Aaron. Would the plan then be that you move forward with the documentations going to this, or would you be going back to previously previous documents? Both? It's
both. So we're going to go back and scan in all the old files. So, basically our first step with that is once our craziest election year ever is over, for our clerk staff, the clerk staff is going to be going through all of our files to make sure that, anything that's met its retention schedule is going to be disposed of, things like that. And then whatever's left, we're going to scan that into the system, and then we'll be able to eliminate a lot of those paper files. I mean, some paper files you have to keep. I mean, there are definitely some documents that we have to retain in a paper format. When you talk about say development agreements and construction documents and letters of credit, you have to have the paper copy of that. So there are definitely some paper copies we'll keep. We're never going to go 100% paperless at this point, but there are a whole lot of documents that we do want to retain that we don't need to have paper copies of. So all those ones we don't need copies of, we will definitely be scanning into the system and then disposing of.
Great. Thank you.
Anybody else? All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. Discussion and possible action on 2021-2022 capital improvement plan.
All right, let me get to the screen here and see if I can share. Tried this last time, see if I can do it again. All right, I can do it. Let's see. So can you see my screen?
Mm-hmm.
Are you seeing
Yes,
the? Okay, good. All right. So as I talked about in the memo, this is not our usual CIP. I mean, you know what our usual CIP looks like. It's like a formal book. It's laying things out for 5+ years. It's talking about a whole lot of, kind of long-term things that we should be doing. But we didn't do that this year. And I think for a very good reason. We just don't know what's going to happen for 2022. We really don't with that budget and CIP. I think, we feel comfortable with the 2021 budget and where we're at. But depending on how things go, we just don't know how things are going to go next year. I mean, our hope, as with everyone, is that we have a vaccine, things get cleared up, and the economy's back to the way it's been. But we've been lucky so far. I mean, strong economy still in Hudson, strong growth, things like that. But we just don't know if things drag on too far into next year, what could that mean for our budget for next year as far as tax revenue collections and even our non-tax revenues and things like that, which then has a big effect on our 2022 and further budget. So what we're trying to do with this one is we shrunk it down. We basically shrunk this down into a 2-year CIP that looks at our historic 2-year bonding cycle. So we are up to do another round of bonding in 2021. And that's what this CIP looks like, is that 2-year cycle. And so what we did was we looked at Mike, Mraz, and Dean kind of looked at infrastructure projects, prioritize those out to the most important ones that we really need to do right now. We put those in there. We looked at our buildings. We looked at some of that sort of stuff. We put those things in there. And we kind of have a very focused CIP. And the goal of this would be these are things we think we should really get done. Now, if we get into 2021 and things aren't going great, we can always revise this. We can put a hold on these projects. We can wait on these projects. We could cancel some of these projects. Even though we have the money, doesn't mean we have to spend it on what's right here. We have a lot of flexibility of what we can use the money for, especially when you're talking about the notes, which is what we use to fund like the buildings, IT, equipment, that sort of stuff. We have a ton of flexibility with those. Even though we may have earmarked them for these sort of things, we can always use them for something else if we want to. And then our goal would be, is if things get cleared up next year, everything looks good, we'll re-roll out a full CIP in 2021 and possibly look at even upping our 2022 projects and things like that. So this is more just let's get through doing the things we think we really need to do and then reevaluate next year when we know more. And again, with that, even with everything on here, nothing's approved now. I mean, if the finance committee approves the CIP,
maybe.
And the council approves it later, doesn't really matter, and because everything will come before the council again for review in a future time, and we'll talk about it again. This is just kind of laying the plan out. So with that, basically, kind of what I want to touch on really is, if you look, we've got about $7.3 million in projects next year. We've got about $1.7 million in 2022. Again, we try to be super conservative kind of with moving this forward of what we're looking at for doing. The funding for it, obviously you look down here, this is the one that affects our debt levy. It's the $3.21 million next year in future bonds and notes, and then $1.7 million the following year. Now note that these have the tax levy impact, but because they won't be bonding won't be done until next year, we won't actually see the tax levy impact till 2022. So we won't actually start paying for these until 2022. When we do start paying for them, we'll have another long-term debt rolling off in 2022. So the levy increase that we'll do in 2022 will actually still keep, if we stick with this amount, we'll still keep our debt levy the exact same amount we're doing for next year. So the 2021 debt levy will stay the same for 2022, even though we're going to be adding this amount of debt to it. So we're trying to keep it flat by rolling off debt, adding new debt, that sort of thing. So with that, that's the main funding. Obviously, you see some things on here that are non-tax or non-debt levy. So we have the TIF for the boat launch project. We're estimating that right now. We don't know for sure, but we're assuming about $1.9 million for that Hagan Street Bridge. We just have to be determined because that's the planning amount. I mean, basically what we do is just take that out of kind of our general infrastructure dollars, and then we reimburse ourselves when we bond for the project, is usually how that works. We've got utility funds. That's at $1.9 million that we'll be using for our share of the Highway 35 utility project. And so that's kind of the rundown of how we get to the total number. So if you go down and look at the projects, here's our 2021 project list. I think the biggest thing I want to note is under these miscellaneous building updates, we basically have $5,000 for city hall improvements. We're not exactly sure what we need for city hall improvements yet, but we know we need improvements. I mean, if you look at the outside of the building, you know that we have tuck pointing issues. We know that we have some issues with the front steps. We have some roof issues. If you look at the inside of the building, you know that we need carpet replacement and things like that to be done as well. We also have the funding in here also to update the council chambers, to make it a permanent council chambers versus the movable tables, that sort of thing. So we estimated $500,000 for that work. If it's less than that, not a problem. We can use it for other projects, other, building repair projects, things like that. But that's what we have earmarked for now. And we're going to go this winter basically, and we're going to do a thorough review of the city hall building with city staff, and we're going to identify kind of here's all the work we need to do. It will include some of the HVAC updates that we've been mentioning recently that we know we need to have done. So we're going to try to address as much of that we can with that sort of money. The other big number under buildings is in the library PD building with their HVAC system. What was noted is that their chiller is past its useful life and it needs to be replaced. And so that's included in there. But basically scrolling down, we have backup server work. We have a new fireboat. It's a big expense. Again, it's in there and earmarked, but that's one that you may want to talk more with Scott about as far as what it really is and, when we need it, things like that. But it is identified in there as a potential. And I'm not sure if Scott's on, but I'll kind of run through this quick. And then if you have any questions with anything, police, obviously we got a record management system update and then the body squad cams replacement. And then as you go down, you can see what our projects are that have been identified for work. So that's kind of the 2021 list. I don't know if you have any questions. We have, I think, all the department heads on. If you want to ask any questions of anyone.
Are you looking for action tonight, or are you this is for information for us?
It's really for information, take a look at it. If you have some questions, ask it. My thought is that we probably have to bring it back to finance to a second meeting to give you more time to kind of digest it and then, look at it. But it's up, it's up to you. If you want to recommend approval, you can, but it's not, we weren't expecting that tonight.
I'd like to see some questions asked yet, but is everybody on mute that needs to be on mute? There's a lot of background noise.
Yeah, the person
I just muted him.
Okay.
I guess I had a question about the Hagan Street Bridge. Is that for planning for the redevelopment of that bridge, or is this something different?
Yep, it is. So it's the planning for the basically expansion of that bridge, update and expansion of that bridge.
Got it. I was just wanted to clarify that because it says repairs and slip ramp. So
Thanks, Bill, for asking that.
Yeah.
If I could
it's
chime
the
in
engineering cost. Oh, go ahead, Dean. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry if I could chime in on it. It's essentially the planning and design costs for a full replacement of the bridge. So I know there's a couple options out there of full replacement or just essentially add on to the bridge, and
right.
wanted to be conservative, get some money in there in case we wanted to go for the full replacement and go that route. So obviously if we went the add-on route, it would take less effort to do so, and so we would just use less of this money. So
Thank you.
And Aaron, at some point with City Hall, when is it best for us to say, we're not sticking any more money into this building, maybe we need to move?
Well, and that's an option too. I mean, that, I don't know if that's on the table or not, but I mean, we are earmarking the $500,000. Will it be that much? I don't know for sure. But my guess would be it might start getting close to that when we really start, kind of digging into some of it. So, I mean, that is a conversation that we can have. But identifying a new location and relocation obviously has its own expenses as well to it. So, usually it's cheaper.
I think it's time as we're moving and you're digging into this building, we realize where it's at, and it's a sick building. I mean, maybe it's better now, but it's a time to start this conversation.
Yeah. So basically the schedule would be I would sometime before we actually do the bonding and stuff like that, we'll have kind of a report to the council about here's what we've identified as costs. do you want to move forward with this?
And I'm
you
not
know,
saying do it right now, sell like next year. I'm just saying we
Right.
need to move.
Yep. Well, we can definitely have that conversation when we review kind of the, when we get a better handle on what the costs are going to be for update and repair of the building. That'll be a good time to have that conversation about do we want to spend this money or not.
Thanks.
I did have a question on the fireboat. I don't know if Chief St. Martin is on. Wondering basically, is that fireboat a pumper boat? Or is this a different boat?
Yeah, Bill, sorry about my voice. Hopefully you can hear me.
Yep.
Yes, that would be equipped with a pump.
Thank you.
Yeah, don't make them talk too much, Bill.
I don't want to.
So
You guys are,
just to review it
everybody's
then.
used to me not talking much anyway.
So those are your kind of 2021 anticipated projects. And again, you know, with our street ones here, we have our park, kind of our general park ones here. Clearly the biggest one with the park is that boat launch expansion. But we are anticipating that we would be using TIF funds for that. And then the other item to note on here is the in Lakefront Park, kind of along the next to the boat launch there, it's the kind of floating recreational docks where boats will be able to come in, tie off, be able to do that with their boats, walk downtown, things like that. We also have that money in here as well, and our anticipated funding for that is a little unknown right now. Obviously, we'll be applying for a lot of DNR grants, which we hope we'll get assistance for, but that could also be a TIF funded project as well. As we look at it. Actually, both of these could be a combination of grant and TIF funding. So we'll know more as we kind of move forward with the project, start applying for grants, things like that.
So those numbers do not include any kind of grants coming in, because obviously we haven't applied.
No, right now we have these these two numbers right here are not included in any of our bonding numbers right now. So these are standalone. We're not anticipating having to bond it for either of these. So when you look at that total bonding number, they're not included in there. We're looking at those to be, kind of boat launch with the TID, and then with the bridge, it was the same thing, a combination of grant and TIF dollars. But we did not include that into those numbers here because we don't think we're going to have to do it. We're pretty confident that between the TIF and the grants, we'll be okay with both. I mean, we'll see. We never know, but I think we have a good chance to do it that way.
Great.
And so then quick, if we want to roll down to the 2022 projects, just, that note again, we've got that second half, the 250,000 for the city hall improvements. And then, from there, it's fairly minor things with IT, police, some vehicle things. And then you can see what the anticipated 2022 projects are between streets and infrastructure and parks. So, I think ultimately it's a fairly narrow CIP. It's a fairly limited number of our most highest priority projects. And I think the thing we all have to remember is it can change. We could drastically cut it down if things don't go well, or we could really increase it if things get back to normal quickly, and we can afford to do so.
I'd like to hold it over to our next meeting so we have time to ask more questions.
Yeah, there's no rush on it, that's for sure.
Thank you.
None of this discussion has any impact on our budget for next year, so.
All right, so thanks, Aaron. I don't have anything for future agenda items. No comments, anybody?
Move to- Oh,
Second.
Got a motion second to adjourn. All those in favor?
aye.
Opposed? Motion is approved. We stand adjourned. Thanks, everybody.